Welcome back, everyone, to Disruptarian Radio. I'm Amy Walsh, and I'm really looking forward to today's discussion with our guest host, Ryan Dickie Thompson. Ryan, the title of this episode is, it's pretty striking. Why treating trans ideology like a religion makes the most sense.
Yeah, Amy, I have an interesting look at modern-day LGBT ideology and trans ideology. It's a topic that, honestly, it hits close to home for me as a father and as someone who really cares about clarity and fairness in these sometimes deeply emotional debates. I've spent a lot of time thinking about how we can, bring some peace and understanding to what's become incredibly divisive. It's not about attacking anyone's personal beliefs, but more about trying to find a common sense framework that respects everyone's conscience.
That's really, it's a profound goal, Ryan, and I appreciate that. So, to kick us off, you propose treating trans ideology like a religion. Could you elaborate on what you mean by religion in this context? Because I think for a lot of people, that word immediately conjures up traditional faiths, right?
Absolutely, Amy. It's a crucial starting point, really. When I talk about religion here, I'm not using it as a slight or anything negative. My thought process is, look, Merriam-Webster defines religion in a few ways, and one that really hits home for me is a personal set or institutionalized system of religious attitudes, beliefs, and practices. And then it also says a pursuit or interest to which someone ascribes supreme importance. They even give the example, consumerism is the new religion, So it's about beliefs that can be unverifiable or faith-based, things like heaven or karma or even divine intervention. The thing is, when we talk about religious belief, we just don't demand that everyone else affirms it, do we? A Catholic doesn't expect a Muslim to accept the Holy Trinity. A Buddhist wouldn't insist a Christian agrees with reincarnation. My point is, you're totally free to believe whatever you wish, sincerely, deeply, but you're just not free to force others to participate in your specific belief system. That's what I see as the logical, fair approach. It respects freedom of conscience, which is so important, while also protecting other people from being compelled into ideological compliance. It's about protecting both sides, really.
Okay, so that framework makes a lot of sense. This idea of belief versus compulsion. So, how then do you connect this definition of religion, or this religious framework, to trans identity specifically? When someone says they're a woman trapped in a man's body, how does that fit into what you've just described?
Yeah, that's the core of it, Amy. When someone says that, when they say, I'm a woman trapped in a man's body, what they're actually expressing, and this is so important to grasp, is a deeply held personal belief. It's really key to understand it's not a biological fact. I mean, biologically, sex it's binary. It's determined by chromosomes, XX or XY. That's just how it works. Now, gender dysphoria, the discomfort some people feel with their sexed body, that's absolutely real. I don't deny that at all. But the idea that someone is actually the opposite sex, based purely on their feelings, that's metaphysical. It's not material. It's a claim about an inner reality, not an outer, observable one. So that right there, that makes it a belief. And it's not just some private belief they keep to themselves. It's one that, increasingly, it really comes with rituals. Think about it. Pronoun declarations, right? And dogma, like the phrase, trans women are women. And then, and this is where it gets really serious, it can even come with what I'd call heresy laws, where misgendering someone is treated as, hate speech. This belief system, it fundamentally doesn't require evidence. What it truly requires, what it thrives on, is affirmation. And that, to me, that's the absolute core of faith. That's what faith is. So, if we follow that logic, it's pretty clear. Trans identity isn't just a simple personal statement. it truly functions like a religion in how it operates within our society.
Wow, that really clarifies it, Ryan. So if we accept this idea that it functions like a belief system, then what are the implications of that? I mean, specifically when it comes to, the demands for affirmation that we often see. How does that fit into this framework?
Yeah, that's the big point, isn't it? The thing is, Amy, if someone truly believes something sincerely, that belief, it can still be, well, wrong, or at least not universally applicable. Think about it in terms of traditional religion. A devout Hindu, for example, might believe eating beef is sinful, and that's their deeply held belief, but they absolutely don't have the right to stop you from, ordering a cheeseburger at a restaurant. That's just how it works in a free society. It's the same logic here. Someone can sincerely believe they are a woman, even if they're biologically male. That's their belief. But they shouldn't then have the right to compel everyone else, all of us, to see them as such. This is where the line of coercion comes in. Trans ideology often, it insists that others change their speech, their personal views, and even public policies, all to comply with a personal identity belief. And that is its coercion. It's exactly the kind of overreach that, let's be honest, would never be tolerated if it came from a traditional religious group. I mean, imagine if, say, a Christian group demanded the state legally recognize the Holy Trinity on official documents, or they forced public schools to teach that Jesus is Lord as a factual universal truth. People would, and rightly so, call that out for exactly what it is, religious imposition. No one would stand for that. So, the really critical question is, why is it any different when the state rewrites legal definitions of biological sex to accommodate a deeply held personal belief about gender identity? It's fundamentally the same mechanism of compelling belief.
That's a really stark comparison, the idea of a Trinity Recognition Act. It makes you think. So if we're saying this is like a belief system, then how does the government's role fit into this? I mean, why are we seeing things like gender recognition acts when we don't have laws validating other faith-based claims?
Yeah, exactly. That's the core of it for me. I mean, as I've noted, in my breakdown of a debate I had with Papa Gut, if we really do acknowledge trans identity as a belief system, then the very existence of these legal mechanisms, like the Gender Recognition Act, it just becomes fundamentally questionable. Why? Because, well, we simply don't legally validate other faith-based claims. It's just not what we do. Think about it this way. There isn't a single law out there that says the government must recognize someone's belief in the Holy Trinity, or, karma, or reincarnation. And that's absolutely right. That's how it should be. The state has no business affirming religious or metaphysical claims. It's not their lane. So it begs the question, really loudly, why then does it affirm gender identity, which is at its core a metaphysical claim? It's a belief about one's inner, sense of self, divorced from biological reality. It's not material in the scientific sense. The government, it shouldn't be in the business of endorsing or codifying these personal, subjective beliefs into law. If it's something that requires affirmation rather than evidence, it falls into that category of faith. And governments shouldn't legislate faith. It opens up a whole can of worms for everyone.
So, if the government shouldn't be legislating these beliefs, and we're talking about things like the Gender Recognition Act, what happens then to, say, our everyday language, like the words man and woman? Because it seems like those are getting redefined in a really significant way.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another crucial point in all of this. What trans ideology effectively does is it turns labels, simple labels like man and woman, into moral statements. They're no longer just biological descriptions, based on fact. They become imbued with this heavy moral weight, And that's why if you misgender someone, it's not just, treated as a factual mistake. It's treated as a moral sin, like you've committed a wrong, a grave offense. But this only really makes sense if we, as a society, assume there's this inherent moral significance to these categories that goes beyond biology. In reality, woman is, it's simply a biological term. It's not a badge of honor, and it's certainly not an insult. It's just a descriptive word. So, to call a man a woman just because he feels like one, it's akin to saying, calling someone Catholic because they light a candle and, say a Hail Mary, but without actually believing in Catholic doctrine. It's a superficial performance of identity, really, not actual membership in the category. And that distinction, I think, is really, really important here.
Okay, so if we follow this line of thinking, this idea of treating trans identity as a belief system, what are the actual practical benefits? Like, how does this framework help everyone involved?
Oh, that's a great question because it really does offer a ton of benefits for everyone. First off, for trans individuals themselves, it provides genuine freedom of belief. They can absolutely believe what they want, sincerely, and live according to that belief. That's their personal conviction, and that's respected. Then there's the freedom from coercion for others. This is huge. It means other people aren't forced to affirm or adopt or actively participate in beliefs they just don't share. It allows for a pluralistic society where different viewpoints can exist without one compelling the other. And this is really central to, I think, a free society. It also sets really clear boundaries for public policy. The state simply doesn't write laws based on metaphysical beliefs, right? We wouldn't have a Trinity Recognition Act, for example. So, it brings a consistent standard to how government interacts with deeply held, but ultimately non-scientific claims. And finally, it maintains a critical respect for science. Biological sex remains a stable and factual category. It's not redefined or erased to accommodate a personal identity. You can be kind to someone without capitulating on what you know to be factual. And you can absolutely be respectful without affirming untruths. It's a bit like, you can respect a Muslim without saying, there is no God but Allah. You can respect a trans-identifying individual without saying, trans women are women. It's about drawing a very clear line between personal belief and objective reality.
That's really insightful, Dickie. This idea of distinguishing between belief and objective reality. It brings up a point you've touched on before, something about your travels, if I recall. Has your perspective, I guess, on this whole affirmation culture, has it been shaped by seeing how things are handled elsewhere, in other cultures?
Oh, absolutely, Amy. It's been, profoundly impactful. I've spent the last year traveling throughout Southeast Asia, and what I observed there, it's just really striking, actually, when you compare it to the West. The thing is, in all that time, I haven't seen a single pride flag, not one trans flag either. No pronoun pins, no, obligatory public displays of affirmation that we're so used to here. And yet, here's the kicker, right? You still see feminine boys, masculine women, gays, cross-dressers, and more. They exist. They live. They are absolutely seen, but they're not demanding to be affirmed, and nobody is forced to play along with any particular ideology. What's even more fascinating is, I haven't seen a spike in suicides, or assaults, or mental breakdowns tied to this. The people living outside typical gender norms, they seem just fine, It really makes you stop and, really question things. If constant affirmation isn't required there, if people are still living their lives, why is it such a moral mandate in the West? It just begs the question, maybe affirmation culture isn't the solution we've been told it is. Maybe, just maybe, it's actually a symptom of some deeper, underlying issues, and not a cure at all. It's a huge, huge shift in perspective when you see it firsthand.
That's a really powerful point, Dickie, about what you observed overseas. It it makes me think about how this idea of not forcing affirmation or belief applies closer to home. You're a father, right? How does this perspective, this idea of belief without compulsion, relate to how you approach things within your own family, especially concerning your own deeply held convictions?
Yeah, Amy, that's a perfect segue, actually. It's something I think about a lot. You know, as a dad, I've spent years raising my kids in a home where I live by some really strong Christian convictions. I mean, I've shared my testimony at Baptist conventions. My belief in Jesus isn't lukewarm at all. It's absolutely central to who I am as a person. But here's the thing, and this is what really matters to me. I have never, not once, forced my children to adopt my faith. I don't require them to pray or quote scripture or even attend church if they don't want to. That's because I truly, deeply believe in conscience, not coercion. It's about their individual journey, their individual belief. So, when someone expects me to adopt their belief system, like affirming a self-declared pronoun, it just doesn't sit right with me. I don't ask my kids to recite creeds, right? Why should anyone ask me to affirm a metaphysical claim that I simply don't believe to be a biological fact? It's the exact same principle to me. Requiring me to use someone's self-declared pronouns, it's very much like requiring someone to say grace before meals or confess a Bible verse in conversation. It truly feels like religious behavior, just cloaked in the language of identity. Let people believe what they want, but don't force others to speak their creed. It's just not right.
Wow, that's incredibly insightful, Dickie. And it really drives home the point about personal conviction versus compelled compliance. And you know, speaking of groups, pushing back against this kind of ideological demand, are there other movements or shifts you've noticed where people are saying, hey, this has gone too far? Like, are there other communities, within the broader spectrum that are starting to vocalize similar concerns?
Oh, absolutely, Amy. This is actually something that gives me a lot of hope, to be honest. There's a really significant cultural shift happening right now, especially, within the LGBTQ plus community itself. I mean, we're seeing what some are calling the normal gays movement, and it's truly refreshing to witness. It's people like Ariel Scarcella, for example, a lesbian YouTuber, who was a former left-wing activist. She's now identifying as part of these normal gays. And when she says normal, she means exactly that. Not radicalized, not woke, not pushing like drag shows on toddlers. Just normal, liberty-loving gay individuals who want to live their lives without coercion or this kind of cult-like conformity. She came out with this message, and it hit like a thunderclap. The idea that the LGBTQ plus movement, the original one, has been hijacked by extremists, and it's time for the sane ones, the reasonable ones, to break away. When the original gay rights movement was happening, it was about equal treatment under the law, right? Fair housing, workplace protections, the right to marry. That was it. It was about liberty, voluntary exchange, live and let live. But somewhere, and this is what really gets me, somewhere along the way, that movement got totally hijacked. What used to be a fight for civil rights, it's just turned into this cult of identity. And every new week brings another made-up gender or some new alphabet soup label, and if you don't chant the slogans, you're out. Ariel Scarcella, she'd just had enough, and thousands of others resonated with her now viral video where she said, "We are normal gays." Think about that for a second. They had to publicly declare themselves normal because the culture around them has become so unhinged that common sense is now seen as radical. It's what happens when identity just becomes religion and reason becomes heresy. I mean, Ariel even attended New York's Pride Parade where, she should be totally welcome as a gay woman, and she got harassed. But not by right-wingers, not by homophobes. No, by the very same tolerant woke activists who claim to be inclusive, all because she dared to say that children shouldn't be put on puberty blockers, that women's spaces should be protected, and that just maybe we shouldn't invent new genders every Thursday. It's clear, as she puts it, that the LGBT has been hijacked by the QA++. The original fight for equality, it's just been swallowed up by fringe gender ideologues who want to erase biology, silence dissent, and label anyone who disagrees as a bigot, even other gay people. These aren't liberals, Amy. These are leftists. And there's a huge difference. Liberals believe in freedom. Leftists believe in control. So, normal gays, lesbians, gay men, bisexuals, they're increasingly uncomfortable with how transgender ideology is being used as, like, a battering ram against kids, against parents, teachers, and women's rights. And they're not staying quiet anymore. You've got people like Blair White and Buck Angel, both transsexuals themselves, publicly saying, this isn't what we signed up for. They're against transing kids. They're for biological reality. They know the difference between someone transitioning as an adult and medicalizing confused 12-year-olds. These aren't conservatives in the traditional sense, but they're liberty-minded. They're sane. They want the government out of their business and ideologues out of their bedrooms. That just makes them absolute allies in this fight for cultural sanity. The scariest part, and this really got me, Ariel had to hire a bodyguard to walk around Pride. Think about that. A gay woman at a gay event had to bring security because she knew woke activists might get violent if she didn't toe the party line. This isn't about tolerance, it's about totalitarianism, this mob mentality we've seen before. It's about power, not peace. Ariel really laid out the three major fault lines behind this mass exodus of normal gays: protecting kids, protecting women's spaces, and biological reality versus gender fantasy. These aren't radical positions. They're grounded in science, reason, and liberty. And as a libertarian, I say welcome, because this fight isn't about left or right anymore. It's about liberty or tyranny. It's about whether individuals control their lives, or if the state and its activist enforcers get to dictate every move you make. So I guess to wrap this up and to really bring it all home, it's pretty clear. If people want to believe they're a different gender than their biology, they are absolutely free to do so. That's part of a free society, right? But here's the crucial point. Freedom of belief is not. It's just not freedom to force others to join in. Treating trans ideology like a religion, as we've talked about, it's truly a way to diffuse a lot of this conflict without denying anyone's rights. Believe what you want, live how you want, but don't force others to pretend your belief is a fact. In a pluralistic society, the best way to maintain peace and just calm is to keep belief voluntary and private. That includes religion, and yes, that absolutely includes gender ideology. It makes the most sense.
Wow. Ryan, Dickie, that was, truly an incredibly insightful and candid discussion, on such a complex topic. I really appreciate you breaking it all down for us here on Disruptarian Radio. And to our listeners, I really hope today's conversation gives you, something profound to think about. We've certainly touched on a lot of challenging but really important points. Please do check out more of Ryan's work and other thought-provoking conversations on Disruptarian Radio. Thanks for tuning in.